Good evening. I'd like to call the September 24, 2025 Methacton School Board, School District Board of Directors meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. The public is hereby advised of audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. All board members are present, with the exceptions, we have Ms. Chanda, Mr. Mursky, and Ms. Thiel participating virtually. And we have Ms. Kanko, who will be arriving late to the meeting if traveling conditions allow. We'll now move to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerby.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. This evening, we have three presentations. The first is the Board Honor Roll. Tonight, we recognize the contributions of our school director, Paul Winters, who has dedicated 10 years to the Methacton School District. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association Honor Roll is the association's way of thanking individuals who exemplify leadership by giving unselfishly of their time and talents for the betterment of public schools and students across the Commonwealth. We thank Paul for his continued support of the Methacton School District and his commitment to our district moving forward. Mr. Winters, if you'd be so kind to join Madam Vice President and me out front to issue your certificate. Next, under guest and scheduled speakers, we have the Emma Awards. Again, this is an opportunity for us to recognize students. This evening, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Regina will be presenting the Emma Awards for both Methacton High School and Arcola Intermediate School. Dr. Regina.
Thank you, Dr. Zerby. Thank you, members of the board. This evening, we are proud of the achievements of all of our students. But tonight, more than 530 students from Methacton High School and Arcola Intermediate School are earning an M Award for maintaining a grade point average, there it goes, of 93% or higher during the 24-25 school year. You'll see the names on the screen, and you can find the list on our website. Earning the M Award for the 24-25 school year, we have 126 students from the class of 2026, 116 students from the class of 2027, 116 students from the class of 2028, 77 students from the class of 2029, and 100 students from the class of 2030. This honor represents not only the hard work in the classroom, but also perseverance, discipline, and commitment to excellence. We commend each student for setting a high standard for themselves and serving an example for their peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Regina, and members of the board. What we do after this evening is we contact the families of all of the recipients of the Emma Awards, and we issue them the award in school the following day or within the next week. So we want to thank our families, we want to thank our students, and we certainly want to thank all the educators and support staff that help make these fine individuals achieve such greatness. So with that said, thank you for your support on that, and we'll go into the last guest and scheduled speaker. We have just a brief update here this evening on the Methacton High School planning process. We have Josh Grice from CHA and Devin Bradbury from the Schrader Group.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? No slides tonight. We'll try to keep this brief. Devin and I will just give a brief update with, again, kind of recapturing some of the next steps. So for the next meeting, which is going to be scheduled for October 6th, our focus at this point is really honing in on the financial picture that came into more of a focus last week and a potential $120 or so million cap, so to speak. So we are now looking at what are the best options for implementation of a project of that nature, whether it's phased. So between the Schrader Group and CHA, we're coming up with some updated budgets and pictures for what that potential project might look like. So again, we're going to try to get that in front of everybody ahead of that October 6th meeting. Also in October, we have meeting dates scheduled for the 14th, which is the Property Committee, which will be some more updates and discussion. October 21st, which is the board work session, where again, we can answer more questions, provide more information and respond to any other questions or comments. And then again, October 28th was the target for the final board vote, understanding where things are currently with financial pictures, maybe still coming into focus. That date might slide, but Schrader Group, CHA, we're still full speed ahead with trying to come up with the final options and budget picture so you guys can make a informed decision. Devin?
Good evening, everyone. Just a quick update. We did have 2 public forums over the past 2 Thursdays. We had, I think, about 12 people on the first one and maybe upwards of 20, 25 in the second one. So we got some good feedback. Everything has been videotaped and is on the websites, correct? So if anyone has any questions about feedback that was received, they can go and view those videos. Just a couple of generalized statements on some of the feedback that we received. There were comments regarding sustainability, several of those, several thoughts on costs, budget, and financing, concerns about parking and traffic with all of the plans, some questions about the Farina building. There were comments about a new construction versus renovation plan and what the 50-year solution might be. There were some discussions about phasing and disruption. Lots of comments about the pool and concerns about the current status of the pool and future new construction of pool. Safety and security is a big thing. That was a focus from a couple of folks there. And then the viability of some of the options that we're showing given the current financial status. Student involvement. I think there were a few students at the second forum that would like to be involved, and that might extend to a few others. And then just a concern generally about the failing areas of the building and making sure that we're addressing all of those issues. So those are kind of a generalized summary of the themes that we heard throughout some of the questions and answers that we've had. Obviously, that's a lot more succinct than what we actually went through in the forums, but anyone who is welcome to go visit the website and watch those as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions from members of the board for our design team to my left? Ms. Perdue?
I just have one, just to clarify and I realize that we have to have the October 6th meeting before we can determine the timeline in reference to the October 28th vote from the board. Do you have an idea of what information will we receive in preparation for the October 6th meeting?
So what we in Schrader Group are working on now are some options from a phased perspective. So we'd like to come with an updated cost estimate, again, staying within the parameters that were established and presented last week, and also a preliminary estimated draw schedule. So that obviously is very critical for the borrowing picture, the financial picture. So between visuals with what a phased project might look like from a floor plan perspective and also from a borrowing perspective or cost over the term of design and construction. So that's what we're going to be presenting and reviewing for that meeting.
And then just a follow-up question, thank you. I know we heard about the Farina Administration Building. When will we get, will we also hear a little bit about that at that meeting, or?
Yeah, we presented on the administration building last week, but the comments and feedback that we received in that meeting, as well as feedback that we received at the open public forums, will be integrated into the proposed options that are going to be laid out on the 6th.
Thank you.
Anyone else to the left, to my right? Any comments, questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, yep.
So just to clarify, the question that Ms. Purdue just asked about, you're going to provide us with an updated phase project. So which option will you be using to do that phase project?
So ultimately, we'd like to try to incorporate all of the priorities and result of 2B. Obviously, that is the most expensive option. So we're looking at how to best incorporate the advantages of the new construction portion of that into a multi-phase type project. But understanding that the 2B new construction solutions are ideal, that's what we are focusing on currently.
So I don't know if I understand correctly. If I remember correctly, and I don't have it right in front of me, the cost for the 2B option was 175 something million, and our budget is 120 million. So how do you get $175 million of construction and renovation in a $120 million budget?
So what we're looking at doing is kind of shifting some of the thought process and focusing on the oldest and most aging parts of the building as a potential phase 1 project, and understanding that the mid-wing and the east wing as the most recent portions of the building, which is what we're in now, as well as the east wing, perhaps deferring some of the improvements for those areas of the building, as well as the portion that is between the gymnasium and the cafeteria. So we're kind of taking an approach that can we approach the building from west to east rather than east to west, or in other words, the existing parts and then maybe looking at what was proposed as new construction. So we're looking at options that would give you some flexibility in terms of getting some of the new construction advantages, but again, within that established budget, or the budget as we understand it to be based on last week.
So are you saying that you're going to be able to remove $55 million of cost by not doing any work in the east wing?
That's what we are evaluating at this point, and we will come on October 6th for some of the options and availability to do that.
And then you're going to have to add back in the additional costs that come with phasing a project over a longer period of time.
Right. So we're looking at currently a 4-year phase 1 project that would address the concerns, address the priorities, and then a potential phase 2 project at some point that would then look at the mid-wing, the east wing, and some of the other spaces.
So I guess if I remember correctly what Ms. Steffi presented last time, I think that the majority of the funding was in the first 3 or 4 years, and then there was a gap, and then there was a small amount of funding at the later years. So you're suggesting that, the $100 million in the first 4 years, and then there would still be funding to do an additional project at the end?
We're looking at a $125 million project over the next
10
5 years.
10 years, because if I remember correctly, the budgets that Ms. Steffi had provided us was a 10-year
Right. So
borrowing
what
scenario.
we're saying is the project would be executed, the phase 1 project would be executed in a 4-year time frame.
But we didn't have 125 million to spend in the first 4 years. So why are we using $125 million of budget if we can't spend that much?
Okay, our understanding was in a 4-year time frame, we would have $125 million to apply to the project.
Okay, but that's not an accurate assessment based on what Ms. Steffi, do you have the slides from last week? Because I don't think that it was 125 million at all. And I definitely was not 125 million in the first 4 years. So why are we doing a project or looking at a project that is overspending our budget? Just right now, just talking about it. Am I like, okay, am I? I guess I'm asking you where this direction is coming from, because it doesn't seem like it's in keeping with the idea of let's revise the project to match the budget. Do we have an answer to that?
So we had a follow-up meeting with the administration where we laid out the plan for a 4-year potential project at $125 million.
So I'm
We are
looking
looking at
at,
how to best
I'm looking
address
at the data.
concerns.
I actually have the slide right here, right? So this slide said we had $125 million between year 1 and year 7. Gave us 125 million. There was 0 borrowing in 8, 9, and 10. So my question to you is, how are you going to borrow $125 million in 4 years if the district admin provided us information that says it's going to only be able to borrow the money in 7 years?
Okay, so there must have been misunderstanding then in the follow-up meeting in terms of what we could fund within a 5-year period. If we could very clearly have parameters for a budget and a time frame, we can provide you guys with some better direction.
So maybe you can explain to me, what were the differences that were presented to you in the follow-up meeting versus what the board was presented in Tuesday's meeting?
I think
Like-
maybe it was some understanding of what could be spent in a certain amount of time. And if we could still execute a 4-year project, that it would possibly be funded at a certain amount.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to have to push this question over to our business manager because I don't understand. I thought this was our maximum borrowing scenario based on the amount of available budget we have to take on debt, how much debt we could take on every year. So if we can only take on $30 million of debt in year 2, 33 million in year 3, 29 million in year 4, that doesn't give us enough money for a $125 million project.
Understood. So I would appreciate
I
it.
guess I'm concerned that you're going to spend money and time, which is money, that to do an assessment and provide us with another option of a project that we still can't afford. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I'm going to give everybody else a chance to think about this for a second and maybe ask some additional questions before I ask the rest of my questions.
Ms. Leary?
So I would just second that. I do not want to have CHA spend money on something if we can't afford it. So this is what we know. And I'm disturbed that there was a subsequent meeting and you were told something different than what the board knows. So I just want to put that out there. But I'm also concerned that there's been a decision made that you're going to do this to 2B, because the board has never made a decision that of all the options that Schrader provided us with, that we wanted to do 2B. So for me, that's problematic, and I just want to say that out loud.
Can I just make one comment, please? So we already know that what we can do with the baseline scope and what we can do with phase 1 or option 1A, right? So those get you close to that $120 million project. So I guess the task was, what can we do differently with that amount of money so that you can actually see some of your priorities come to fruition? So that's what we're exploring. We're not pushing to be. We're looking at ways to get those priorities into some sort of project.
So I appreciate that. I was really responding to what Mr. Grice said, which was you were doing it to be, that you could get basically all of the things. What I heard, maybe I misunderstood you, Josh, was that we could get all of the things in 2B for basically 120 plus some money down the road, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me given the amount of money it costs. But I'm willing to wait till October 6th. But I am concerned that we're doing all this to 2B, if that's what's happening. And I'm still back from where I was on the day one, like a year ago when we started this whole road. And I'm not looking at you gentlemen when I say this, but we need to know what we can afford. And I'm just, again, left with, if there's been subsequent meetings, information I don't have, I'm just disturbed that I don't know what we can afford, and I'm not sure you guys know what we can afford at this point.
Thank you. You can still hear me. Thank you. I just want to echo my fellow board members, and I actually feel badly that there is a misunderstanding, because I left last week's meeting thinking we could afford 125 million over 10 years, and that was where it stood. Maybe those numbers were conservative, but that's what I left understanding, and I don't want to waste time and money trying to figure out what we can afford with what we don't know that we can afford, because it's one of the reasons why we're here, I feel like, because we weren't 100% sure what we could afford. And so I have to echo Ms. Cleary in that we need to know what we can afford. I really appreciate seeing the numbers, like knowing what we can afford, because what I also understood out of last week's meeting was that the part of the reason, like the part of the shift in the affordability, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this is more towards Ms. Duffy in the district, was that the master's facilities plan needed to be worked into the borrowing of the budget. And that's one of the reasons for the shift. So what I would really like to know and understand is what we can afford, because my other understanding right now is that we can afford the 125 million over 10 years with the master's facilities plan if we are always raising to the Act 1 index. And I would really like to know what we can afford if we decide not to raise to the Act 1 index as well. I would like some plans there rather than continually reaching. So I just wanted to share that information, because I feel like I'm hearing something that doesn't match with what I understood from last week's meeting.
Hello. I was not at the meeting last week, but I did watch the recording. And maybe I needed clarification. I'm not really sure, but I also walked away from that recording with the understanding that we were kind of in a tight spot with what we can afford. And now I'm hearing something different, and there were other conversations that we didn't get much information on. So I'm also echoing Ms. Cleary in this graph. I would like to know what the bottom line budget is, what we can afford in totality before we spend any more time and resources on this.
So I think, Ms. Steffi, if I'm not mistaken, that you presented, a scenario of what we can afford or what we can't afford based on the recently presented master facilities plan and the ability to borrow $180 million over a 10-year period. Now, that that is one scenario in terms of the borrowing, and that's what you presented. Are there other scenarios if, for example, CHA gave you a draw schedule that might be different than what we used in order to prepare this presentation?
Yeah, so with the draw schedule, the borrowing scenario would change.
And I think then and so while the borrowing scenario would change, the amount of money that we would totally be able to borrow over that 10-year period of time is about the same. It includes of the money that we would borrow for the master facilities plan, as well as the high school, as it's laid out in your original presentation from last week, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I think then what was discussed among the design team was how do we address and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but how do we address the baseline matters in a way that also addresses some of the priority one items that the board had suggested. And I think a lot of the discussion was maybe there's a way to do it in leveraging some of the ideas associated with 2B, not necessarily in completeness, but that would be able to address some of the things, not only from a building perspective, especially in the oldest part of the building, but also in some of the site work. And it was estimated at that time that doing some of that work in a phased process would be able to, it's my understanding, that would be able to fit into a $120 million budget. Is that what was discussed, or was it something different than that?
Correct. That's the goal, to see what fits within that budget. However, the time frame was compressed from a 10-year implementation to a 5, essentially, with a year of design. So that's, I think, where the disconnect is there. If we need to extend even a phase 1 project out over 10 years instead of 5, we can certainly do that if that's the requirement and the limitation.
So then, Ms. Steffi, I guess the ultimate question then is if we were taking a 10-year borrowing scenario and we were going to compress that into a 5, well, if it's 5 years of a project, it might be 5 to 6 years borrowing. I'm assuming, would that be fair or not, to assume that? If we were doing 5 years of let's say 4 years of construction, 1 year of design, would it possibly be 5 years or possibly 6 years of borrowing? Is that what you would normally find in these scenarios?
I mean, that would be up to the district's financial picture. I can't really answer that, but
Okay.
Again, the intent was to try to compress the construction timeframe into a continuous process instead of over a 10-year period. Again, we can spread it out, we can phase it however it works within the district's limitations. We just have to kind of change the approach a little bit heading into the 6th.
Yeah, Mr. Dew?
I'll let Ms. Austin go since she.
Thank you, Ms. Purdue. So yeah, I apologize that I was not at the last meeting, but I did hear of, and maybe this is what we're talking about here. When we were in Finance Committee, there was talk of more of a project-based approach to this whole scenario. I don't even know how we can predict how much we can borrow over 10 years, given how many factors you're trying to solve for here. You know, there's so many variables with everything. So I don't even know how we can have an accurate projection out 10 years. But I guess what I thought was going to be happening was that we would talk about the first priorities. We would talk about what makes sense in order, in chronological order, to implement these projects. Do we, you know, in order for anything to happen, to get to 1A or 2B, we would need to do the Mill Road work. We would need to do the site work. Then we would need to do work on the pool. And then it kind of like building something out that makes sense, that you can keep going with, or you can stop at any time, but you still have, you know, maybe we need to pause for a year because of whatever factors. But then maybe we can keep going, and to have a project approach where they're not discrete projects exactly, but they would stack on top of each other in a way that makes sense so that you're not going back to, to something that you, as at the end of 2B and, oh, we always wanted this, but now we can't do it because we did, we already built this part of it. So with the goal of 2B, which I think is what we all want, but to do it in a way that is more discrete, that allows for all these factors of borrowing to come into play because we just don't know what they are.
Ms. Graff?
Yeah, so just to respond to Ms. Alston for a second, I think that got shifted between Finance Committee and when we were presented with the financial picture last week. Because the financial picture said, in 10 years, you still cannot get to 2B. You do not have the ability to get there. And that's assuming some significant tax implications like taxing at the Act 1 index every year. So it's not like we're assuming there's no additional like tax implications, right? And it's taking all of that additional debt that we could take on in that 10-year period, and we still can't do it. And I think that's where we said, okay, so if the borrowed amount is only 120 million, then what does that look like? And I feel like we keep going around this question, but at the end of the day, if the only amount of money in the savings account between now and 10 years from now is 120 million, I don't know why we're asking our architect and our design team to go and build us something at 125 million, because that extra 5 million doesn't exist. And I'm a little concerned that the first time Mr. Grice presented this, he just 5 minutes ago said it was a 4-year project. Then I heard the superintendent say it's a 5-year plan, but the borrowing happens over 6 years, doesn't it? And I'm a little concerned because I feel like we're pressing our design team to give us the answers we want in order to get the borrowing to fit into what we can afford. Now, if the draw schedule changed, and you know that the draw schedule changed so that you could change the structure of the project, then why are we not seeing the draw schedule right now? Because that's what the administration just said, that the draw schedule changing is what allowed us to go to 125 million. So, Mr. Grice, why are you not presenting the updated draw schedule to us today?
Because we don't have it prepared, because we don't have a plan yet.
So if you don't have the draw schedule prepared, then there is no change to the $125 million budget over 10 years, because the district could not have addressed that change because we don't have the information from our team.
Correct. So we are not establishing a budget. We are trying to respond to a budget.
Right.
We are trying to give options for fitting within a budget. Unfortunately, the budget parameters change every time
You have a conversation.
we're here.
Right. And that's
So-
my concern as well, is that we're not giving you good parameters to work within. I don't want you to come back and give us an option at 125 million for a 4-year spend, and then for the district to say, well, we can't afford that, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Because we can't afford 125 million in 4 years, according to what Ms. Steffi prepared. So if that has changed, and the administration needs to tell us it has changed because you're giving us more information. I do not agree with giving any direction to our architect and engineer to spend $125 million on a 4-year project if we cannot afford it. And according to last week's presentation, we can't afford it. So am I missing something?
Well, I hear what you're saying, but that's not the sequence of how things have been happening. So to give you an understanding is we go back into the design group and we talk about, okay, we have $120 million that we can work with. What are some of the things that we can do with the available options and the priorities and with the $120 million that we have available to us?
Okay, first things first. First, you just said 120 million. Mr. Grice just said earlier 125 million. So already we're talking about two different budgets. So, and I
Well, Ms.
don't
Graff,
agree
I
with
apologize.
the
I
approach.
don't have the paper in front of me.
I
so
don't
do
agree with the approach that we talk to the design team about what they can do for us, and then we set a budget. We have a budget. It was presented last week. This is the budget. You can't go over this number. And you need to do a project in 3 years or 4 years or whatever it takes. But whatever your draw schedule is going to drive this budget limitation. Because if you can't draw more than $33 million in year 3, that could impact how much you can spend on the total project, right? Because year 3 tends to be your highest spend, year 2, whatever it is, right? That bell curve of a draw schedule is going to be limited by what Ms. Steffi put together. We may not even be able to spend 125 million or 120 million, depending on the draw schedule.
So my understanding from the meeting last week is these are preliminary projections of a potential outlay financially. I don't recall that there was a vote made that says this is definitely our budget, that this is the direction for how much we can spend. It was pretty much the first time, from my understanding, that that information was presented to the board. I don't know if that's the budget. You guys need to tell me if that's the budget. 125 million, give or take in rough values, was the amount at the end of the day. So again, I'm not telling you what the budget is. We would like to know what the budget is.
I agree with you.
But we
I
don't,
think
we
you
don't
and
have,
I
but
are
we
on the
don't
same
have,
page.
we don't have a budget. And
So-
and so, for example, we don't know what the draw schedule is, so we can't develop a budget. This is a scenario of.
We're not going to
being able
develop a budget from the draw schedule. We're going to develop a draw schedule from the project, which is predicated on the budget. You're looking at this from a perspective of the district can't afford a draw schedule with a $50 million draw in years 2, 3, or 4. So if you have to take $50 million those years, you may not be able to do it. So that may limit your project. So yes, we could ask Mr. Grice to go and say, hey, if we did a $120 million project, what does the draw schedule look like? And he's going to have to think about what does a $120 million project look like and what draw schedule is associated with that. And then we're going to have to come back and look at the number and the amount we could take that year. I get that there's a back and forth in that, but if he's looking at projects that are outside the scope of what this tells us we can afford, we're already off the page.
And I agree with that. And that's what we talked about in our meeting. The assumptions that were delivered in this meeting were based on the fact that, yeah, we can meet that number in that presentation.
So the number in the presentation over the 10-year period is 125 million, and you have 4 million in year 7. So let's assume, because I've heard it a couple times tonight, you're going to use the first 5 years of this schedule, which means you only have 121 million. That's the maximum the district can borrow, according to Ms. Steffi and her assessment. That's the maximum amount. There's no way that the district can do more than that. So the fact that we're
Excuse
even
me,
talking
Ms.
about
Graff,
anything
in a
over
six-
that number.
In a 6-year timeframe?
From year 1 to year 5.
Okay.
Year 6 is a zero draw, so you have no
Understood.
additional
I just want to make
budget.
sure that our timeframe is
Right.
is
So if you're
consistent.
telling
not
me
a
it's
10-year, a
4
6-year.
years, then you would have less, right? Because if you go to 4 years, you're going to have less because you won't get that last 17 million.
Right. So again, whatever's been borrowed to date, factoring in at least a 12-month design timeframe, and then 4 years of construction. So if that does not work within that 6-year timeframe, I understand. If the number is not 125 or 120, if it's 118 or 117, that's great. We can work to that number. We just need to know what the number and what the timeframe is for the number. We have to kind of work backwards.
Mhm.
We can give you all sorts of different options and timeframes, but if they ultimately don't work with what is financially reasonable, it does no good.
I agree. So my position is that I think that the finance committee needs to take a hard look at these numbers and decide what the district could afford. And then the board needs to decide if we want to spend up to that amount or not. And maybe to make that decision, they're going to need you to come back with some ideas about what that would get us. What would we be able to get for the budget that we have to spend? And so I think that the finance committee needs to take a hard look at these numbers and figure out if this is actually where we could spend up to or not. And if finance is comfortable with it and they can give that direction, then I think the board could give you direction to move forward with that budget. But at this point, I feel like we're in this, you're going to give us a design, then we're going to evaluate the budget again, and then your design's going to be overpriced, and then we're going to go back to the budget and back and forth and back and forth. And I think that's a waste of district money.
And Ms. Graff, I think probably the most important point in what you're sharing, and I have to agree with you on this one piece, is we haven't established whether or not the board wants to go to the Act One index in these projections for all these years. And I think your comment to bringing it back to the Finance Committee is probably a good idea. So I appreciate you bringing that to light and bringing that to our attention, because we didn't really determine that everybody was good with that. We did determine, at least our understanding was that, hey, we have a budget here, or we have a scenario of what we can borrow. And it was the maximum. And then we decided to get a design team to go out and try to build toward the maximum. That may not be what we want. And so to your point, that might be a good, actually a really good idea for us to revisit these numbers with the Finance Committee, and then to be able to come back to the full board to make sure that, that's the direction. Because if they're designing for $120 million or designing for $80 million, the ability to get certain things done is a big difference. So I think that's a good point. Ms. Perdue?
So I just want to just go back, just because I brought up the question in reference to what will be presented at the October 6th meeting. And maybe considering the questions that are being asked, it don't seem like a special meeting or what is proposed is probably the right direction to go for the 6th without having a Finance Committee meeting, which is not scheduled till October 15th, before something can be presented, right? And just based on things that just from the discussion today and what we saw last week in reference to what, based on our borrowing capacity, and I know the question was asked last week, can we borrow this amount in this year, right? And a lot of things, I believe it was said, it was no, right? If there's information given by, I'm assuming the administration, to the design team or whatever it is, it seemed like there's a little bit of confusion, or maybe you don't have the right direction provided. I would like to say, and I'm not proposing anything, but what it sounds to me is that the October 6th meeting may not be the right time to have something to present to the board. And I did step back and ask in reference to the meeting or the 28th in reference to having that as a voting meeting, because I think there's still a lot of things that need to be cleared up. I think there's a lot of miscommunication or some information that needs to be clarified, just because we heard something different and it sounded like there was some other discussions that maybe the board may not be fully updated on.
Yeah, Ms. Perdue, I think if there's no objection from members of the board, with the suggestion of having the Finance Committee have the discussion about what Ms. Seffi had presented, and being able to make other determinations associated with that data, specifically, in my opinion, whether or not we do want to be borrowing up to the Act One index. I mean, that's a critical decision in the future of all of this. So if there's no objection, I'd like to pause on the October 6th meeting and bring it to the finance chair. Are you okay with us doing that?
Yeah, that's fine. The thought that goes through my mind, and I mean, we we talked about using the Act One as a guidance for a new high school. And if that is not the guidance that the board was going to provide for a renovation rehab, whatever ends up being, need to speak up. I mean, the assumptions that were carried on from the new high school to the renovation related to the finances. So I encourage everybody on the board to get up to speed with the borrowing, what the assumptions are, what the scenario that Ms. Steffi presented. No problem in the pause. Everybody's got to come to their own conclusion of what they want to do, though. They keep on, it seems like somebody wants a layup to say, this is exactly what it's going to be like, and you're going to be committed to this. You have to understand that there are variables and assumptions in this process and choices that have to be made. And that could, I would completely respect. If you don't want to go to Act One for the next 10 years, fine, that's fine. We just need to know it. But it's coming up today as something newer, fine, good. But I feel like it's almost like usually a board in around November provides direction to the administration about if they're going to go past Act One, right? Somewhere in November, December timeframe for a directional for we almost need to be doing that as a vote from a perspective of, okay, do a 10-year projection, because I don't want this wiggle room about, okay, now I didn't really commit to Act One for the next 10 years. So bring it back to finance, cancel the 6, that's fine, no problem from my perspective, but I think we need some self-evaluation going on here as well.
So if in fact, I'll just say this and then we'll move it on to other questions here. If in fact we do cancel the 6 and we do have a conversation in finance with setting some of the, I guess, maybe different financial parameters, the administration will look at other alternative dates out beyond the October 28 targeted voting meeting, just in case we're not prepared informationally to make a decision at time. I'm assuming that we wouldn't be, but I certainly don't want to take that off the table if in fact we do have that information available to us. So it'll likely extend the period of time for which we'll make some final decision. In the meantime, we still would want to, or I guess the question is from the board, do we want the design team to pause temporarily until we come back from the finance committee meeting to give them the proper direction?
So just from a clarification, what is our arrangement with Schrader and CHA? Are we paying for time and material at this point?
I don't think so. I think we had a flat fee for the period of time to bring this to a concept vote.
I can say that for CHA. I'm not sure what the arrangement was with Schrader Group.
Can you confirm?
Yeah, it is a flat fee for the term of the feasibility study, but I'm not sure that we anticipated it going past that date at this point.
And the date being what, the end of October? Okay.
Yeah. So my opinion is that the feasibility of understanding what those projects would be and sequencing and what specifically would need to be done from a renovation. If the renovation amount that we saw is at a higher cost than what you're saying you could potentially do with moving things around, not affecting the east wing and the mid wing, I would continue on. We would need that information to understand it. I don't know what the full stop does for us other than give us less information.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cleary, did you want, okay. Ms. Graff?
So in terms of, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Winters, about continuing to move forward. I'm thinking about that. I'm not necessarily opposed to that because it does help us to keep getting more information. I think my concern was moving towards an 2B option, which is $50 million over what we could spend over 10 years, seems to be frivolous. And I don't think that it is a sound decision for us to put our team to work to lay out a plan to do something that we're only going to say no to because we can't afford it. We all know that. Everybody on this board knows we cannot afford to spend 180 million over 10 years unless we're willing to forego a whole lot of other stuff. And when we talked about the 10-year plan, not one board member said they were willing to forego the 10-year master facilities plan projects in order to fund additional work at the high school. Not one board member. So I don't think that we're willing to forego all of that other work to generate additional funding for the high school project. So I think directing you to move forward to a $180 million project, which will end up costing more money when we break it into multiple projects, as Ms. Alston had mentioned. So now we would be up to 190 million, or maybe it ends up to be 200 million, which is even farther outside our budget. So to me, that's where I was thinking about it. But I hear what you're saying about having the design team continue because they're under contract to do this work and they're planning to continue this work until the end of October. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I just think maybe we need to scale back to something that is more reasonable. And along that line, we were supposed to also get a presentation of the classroom utilization study that was done, which I think could also inform how big of a renovation, how many classrooms are in use, what do we actually need moving forward, and that has not been provided yet. So I know in property this had come up, and I know it also came up at the board meeting. And so maybe we should ask that question of, that's information that would be informing a renovation construction project in terms of what we're using in the high school and how much swing space we would need, and all of these other things came from that decision. And I don't know that we have an answer to that yet either. So I guess I should ask the question.
Yeah, the administration is preparing the utilization report. And we did provide in last week's presentation just a brief summary of the actual utilization in terms of, I believe it was like 73.5% or something to that effect. But if the board wants the full report on that, we can certainly provide that. I think in terms of the design professionals, is there any value in designing for what was to be what I would see a modified 2B plan? Is there any value for the board in terms of seeing such a thing? We're not designing for 2B. We're designing for a modified 2B. Is that a?
Sure. If we can have some indication of what improvements could be deferred or not incorporated, that would be a big help from 2B, certainly. I guess we need to understand, obviously, budget, but what's the district's interest in having a project that spans over 15 years? I mean, obviously, that's not ideal. So again, we need some more direction with budget and overall time frame for when this campus is going to be under reconstruction.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation, and I do have just a few more questions. And actually, my questions and my thoughts more aligned to what I need to see and what I was wondering would be available for October 6th. But now that that will be changed, that makes sense. So this is actually more for Ms. Steffi and for, I guess, Dr. Zerbe, which is that, I spent a significant amount of time looking at previous reports and the finances that were presented to us over the past 2 years. And there seemed to be a significant shift just last week. And it seemed with the master facilities plan. So, and the master's facilities plan budget last week was around $60 million, and I'm generalizing. Whereas in June, what was presented was more around $11 million. It might not have it didn't have the 10-year scope. It was a shorter scope of time. But the previous discussions about the budget did not necessarily, for the high school and the borrowing, did not necessarily include the master's facilities plan. Is that correct? like months ago?
When I presented a scenario in May, it was 10 million, 10 years, $180 million, and it was not tied in any way. There was no money allocated to the high school or capital projects.
Okay, and then also previously before that, when talking about what we could borrow, the money we could put towards the high school projects, that was based on what we could borrow and then what we could afford. It was not based on, that borrowing did not count in the money needed for the master's facilities plan, correct?
I'm not sure about any previous presentations. I can't speak to that.
Yeah, that's okay, maybe Dr. Zerby, if you can, I can't see you, so I don't know if you're nodding or anything, so, sorry.
I'm not sure what your question is. Would you mind repeating that? I apologize.
So my question is, over the past 2 years, when we looked at different options and we looked at different things, and we looked at the different options of what we could afford and the different plans, we were looking at the borrowing limit and what we could what we could borrow up to, and then what we could afford for the high school. But that borrowing did not factor in the master's facilities plan, because that seemed to be a very big difference last week.
Yeah, I think you're correct in terms of, we had a direct focus on what we could try to afford under a new construction. So I don't think it included an update on the master facilities plan.
Okay, so that actually leads to the information that I need in order to feel comfortable with whatever we decide to do next, which is, I am only speaking for myself. I am not comfortable directing a significant amount of money towards the high school if it means adjusting the master facilities plan and then struggling to keep up with the maintenance of those buildings. So what I would request is that along with finance, the property also step in and look at where options could be, or maybe it's not in a direct way, the timing would probably change, but I would need to see how the phasing fits in with the master's facilities plan to see, I need to visualize that. I would need to see that, or at least to the best of the ability. I might be asking for something more than is possible, but I see that as being really important in budgeting for the next steps. So that's what I would request be discussed going forward, and something that I would feel comfortable, that's something I would need to know is factored in voting on whatever we decide to do next.
Mr. Mursky. You're muted, Glenn.
Sorry. Could you explain for everyone what you mean by a modified 2B option from a phasing standpoint? Because I don't think that's clear.
So when we're saying modified to be option, I think the point is trying to incorporate the priorities that were identified by the board and that were solved for the most part by option 2B. So if there is another way to try and accommodate those priorities with new construction, or with taking some of the concepts that to be incorporated and tweaking them somehow, that's, I think, the intent of what we're trying to accomplish.
In a phased approach, right? So in other words, it's not assuming that you do the work in a series over a period of 18 months, but rather in phases over a period of years.
Correct. And that's the question tonight, is what is that?
So
what is that
okay,
period?
so and that's the part I think people aren't getting. So there's at least 2 phases, maybe 3 or 4 phases. Over what period of time are we talking about?
Well, that's the question. That's exactly the point, is what can the district reasonably afford? What does that time frame look like? And how can we then phase a project that fits that overall time frame?
Let me phrase it a little differently. The $125 million that you're talking about, you've been getting guidance for. how much of the total, do you have an idea, or can you give everyone an impression of how much of like the total to be option could be accomplished in with the $125 million budget?
We don't have that tonight. That was going to be prepared for the
So
October
that
6th.
was the purpose of the October 6th meeting,
Yes.
right? So to present that, what do you think we can, what can you accomplish with a $125 million budget over a period of X years with an ultimate goal of getting to 2B?
That's correct. So at this point, understanding the financial picture, if we need to then alter what we assumed could be potentially a 5-year project inclusive of design, if that needs to be split up and extended out longer, should that be the direction that we're given, we can come up with updated estimates, draw schedules, concepts, however, that information needs to be relayed back to the board.
And it's possible that you come back with a proposal, and because of the total budgetary costs and the phasing and the time period over which the whole project could be executed, we could decide that that's not an option we want to pursue.
That's
Either
correct.
because of cost or because it means we're at the Act 1 index for 10 years, or because it's going to be has to be spread over 15 years, right?
Correct. So that's the discussion, is at what point in the near future, whether it's at finance or next board meeting, would the board have enough information to make that determination?
But I think that's what we just walked through, the logic of why we would want to pursue you continuing to work on what you're working on to be presented next month.
We're happy to do that. We certainly do not want to pause or walk away at this point. We want to see this through to at least give the board enough information, enough options to make a decision. If that decision ultimately is we can't afford it, we need to start over, so be it. But at this point, we're almost at the end of September. I can't speak for Devin's group, but CHA wants to at least give you guys as much ammunition as possible to make an informed decision. We'd like to see it through. So that's all I can say.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Mr. Winters?
So Mr. Mirsky's asked some really good questions. So let me see if I can summarize. It sounds like the hinge pin, or whatever the right word is, the turning point after the meeting last week was evaluating for 120 million, could we get more for our money in a shorter, in the same time period or similar type of time period that includes more of our requests for changes for educational program, be it an auditorium, be it the weight room, be it the apartments, whatever those different things were. Less of them would be fulfilled if we just did with a renovation. So I'm hearing what you said earlier was that the mid wing and the east wing originally in the renovation budget were included in that big number, right? In the renovation job. But what you're saying is perhaps not all of that needs to be done in the short term. So you're swapping out the short term fixes for these wings and evaluating if an auditorium could be built or something like that. Those are the things. Is that where we're at here?
That's exactly where we are at right now. Is we want to try, again, not saying the 2B is the ultimate option, the direction, but we want to show the board what you can get from potential new construction or reconfigured, rebuilt spaces that would accomplish more of the priorities that have been established in a shorter time frame. That's the goal that we're trying to find for you guys.
And it's not with any conclusive, it's just an option. It's a phasing and option scenario that needs to be overlaid with borrowing scenarios, commitment to Act 1 or not commitment to Act 1, other priorities that we may have. It obviously requires other inputs, but what you're doing is providing us more of those options around the construction renovation for the high school that provides more bang for the buck in the short term. that
That's very well said. So when we keep talking about draw schedule, again, it's to show the district, okay, over this X amount of time for the proposed improvements, this could potentially be the annual outlay for construction funds. It doesn't have to be the final say. If you guys say, no, that doesn't work, we need to extend that out by 2 years or 3 years, fine, but we can at least have a starting point. But really, as Mr. Winter said, the goal really is to have the school board, the community see something at the end of an initial project. Our money is being spent on things that will improve this facility, improve the educational process, provide more opportunities for students, all the kind of stuff that we've been talking about. But unfortunately, we can't get a new building. We can't get a 2B off the bat. But how can we maybe phase it in over time? That's what we're trying to give you guys enough information to make a decision and say, yes, this is the right path for the future, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or no, this simply will not work within our financial constraints. That's all we're trying to give you guys in this October timeframe.
Any other comments? Ms. Alston?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that summary, Mr. Winters. I'm wondering if when we get this information at the Finance Committee, or just even to have this going forward, what I'm curious about then is if we're looking at all these different scenarios, borrowing scenarios, draw schedules, how that impacts the draw schedule of these projects. And what I'm curious about is when and what the votes would be. So I would be interested to know, in drawing up any of these scenarios, we would vote, at this time on borrowing this much, and then be voting on construction to move forward on these projects. I would want to see the voting scenarios hand in hand, project, what the construction is that we're voting on, and also what kind of borrowing we would be voting on, because I think that would help maybe clarify what some of the board's concerns about not being able to stop, or being overtaxing, or just not, or kind of being boxed into something that we then don't care to be in. So I just was wondering if we could get a better sense of that along with all this other information.
Yeah, so I think when they do a phased-in approach, they'll say when phase one is approximated to start, and then we can, lay in, this is when the borrowing, and this is when the vote will have to occur in order to put that stuff out. So I think we can coordinate that information.
Yeah, I'm looking to coordinate that information sooner as part of this whole evaluation process. That's what I need to know.
Yeah.
I need to know what I'm voting on project-wise, and I need to know what and when I'm voting on borrowing-wise, and what the impacts of those votes are.
And I understand that the challenge that we have is we can't get a draw schedule until we know what the project is. And so there's this process to, once we come up with what we think would be the concept, then they can provide, a cost estimate. And from that cost estimate, they're able then to give us a draw schedule, and then we'll be able to give it to Ms. Steffi. She then works with our financial advisors to put together the draw schedule and the timing of all that. So we can certainly do that. And with that, the idea is, if we're continuing on the path that Mr. Mirsky and Mr. Winters had talked about in terms of continuing the work, we can get to that sooner. But if we do pause, I really can't give you a draw schedule. I can't give you much in terms of finances different than what you already have in front of you.
No, I'm not saying to pause. I guess I'm just saying that, and even if you can't provide what dollar amounts would be or what exactly things would be, I just want to see, I just want to know more about the process of the whole thing. Even if you can't give specifics, I'm very interested in the process, and when we can pivot, and when we are making these decisions.
That I understand as well, but that's the sequencing part of things, and that'll be in timing, but that'll be depending on how many projects it will use. And of course, as it was said maybe a number of times, the more projects we have and the longer period of time for which those projects go over, because of cost escalations, are likely to be more expensive. So we actually have to lay that out and say, here, we can do it in 4 years, we can do it in 8 years, we can do it in 12 years, whatever the number is. And maybe that's what we need to do, John. We need to come and say, here's the concept to get to what you need, and here's a number of different ways to do it. And then within that time frame, show the decision-making process and the borrowing. Would that help?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm just saying to have it all tied together as part of any information that we're getting, to have what we're voting on and when, and the kinds of votes we're expected to make.
Yeah, thanks so much again. I just wanted to, and this is a little bit different than what Ms. Austin was just sharing, so I apologize for that. But I just wanted to respond back to Mr. Winters real quick, who, because I had mentioned trying to understand numbers that may be not going to the Act 1 index for the next 10 years as well. And I did just want to speak to that real quick and speak up. It is not that I don't necessarily want to, it is that even within the last few months, things have gotten much more expensive for everyone in our community. And I want to be mindful of that as we plan and prepare. So, one of my requests would be, what can we borrow going to the Act 1 index, which is what we're planning on right now. But then, could there be a plan of something else? Something less, something not going up to the Act 1 index, because in all honesty, there's a lot of families in our community who are struggling, and I want to be mindful of that. So that's why I mentioned that, and that's why I'm mentioning this now. It also comes, we just got the change of what we could borrow to 120 million last week, and I just was looking over that. So I just wanted to share some background and did want to speak up. So if I would request that Finance Committee consider talking about that as well. Thank you.
The question to the administration. So assuming that CHA can come back to us with some type of a phase, cost estimates for a phased approach by early October, how long can we expect it'll take to get the financial impact, so the budgetary, how much we can afford over that time period, that phased-in time period? Because I don't think anyone here is going to be in a position or willing to make a decision without having some confidence in what we can afford, to Ms. Cleary's point earlier. So I'm just looking for an estimation on how soon can we expect to have our best estimate on affordability, on phased in, on debt servicing for the subsequent numbers that CHA comes back to us with.
So as soon as I have a draw schedule, I would say within a week.
So by the Finance Committee, scheduled Finance Committee in October?
Well, given the assumptions that we won't be presenting on October 6th, and that we were targeting to be prepared for a presentation on October 6th, if we continue on the path that we were with the design team, we should be able to know what the estimated costs are and have a draw schedule and be prepared by October 15th. Would that be from the 6th to the 15th? Ms. Duffy, that makes sense? Okay.
So,
So when's
if
the
I-
Finance Committee's scheduled meeting?
15th.
What date? In October?
15th.
So it sounds like you can have it prepared for the Finance Committee meeting.
If I'm, provided with something by the 6th, that shouldn't be a problem.
So I understand Mr. Mursky's question. I think we have it backwards still. In other words, the district is now responding to a draw schedule that we are preparing, whereas we should be responding to a budget that the district is establishing. So again, we're happy to come up with as many options and draw schedules as you guys would like, but my fear is that we're either going to be trying to back into that number or somehow we are now dictating what your budget is. I don't want that to happen. I don't want you guys to be responding to an outlay that we are projecting because that's based on our conceptual ideas and what we think is a good idea for the district, but we don't know if that is something you can afford. So with all due respect, we would rather know what a realistic budget and time frame is, and then we can respond accordingly and prepare options and draw schedules from that.
I'm just going to say, I 100% agree with you. I believe that the admin needs to provide the budget and the engineer and architect will work to our budget. So if this estimate of a draw schedule is the maximum the district can afford, and that's a question, then our team can work to these numbers and figure out what projects could be done with borrowing 30 million, 33 million, 29 million, 17 million. And you can work within that. But if these aren't the real numbers, we need to know. So that's my question for admin. Where did these numbers come from? Are these the maximum we can afford on a year-by-year basis? And if they're not, when can we get them?
So, and, you know, we've had a number of conversations regarding what comes first in terms of the chicken or the egg. Do we provide the project or the budget? If we develop, this is what we want you to spend in those years, they will develop the program to actually fit that budget. And we're fine with doing that. I think this gives us what Ms. Stevy presented last week gives us a good indication of what we're able to afford, so long as we're willing to accept the assumptions that are inside of those projections. And as it was mentioned on a number of occasions here this evening, it does include the projected Act 1 going out for what we know in the foreseeable future. So we can do all of these things, but you know, I guess the question remains, as Mr. Winters brought it up, you know, are we talking about the Act 1 index? Or are we not talking about the Act 1 index? I think Ms. Thiel had brought a statement up about whether or not we should be considering the Act 1 index as the parameters. So we have other things inside of the projections that include things along the lines of projected teacher contracts and some other things that are large ticket items. Certainly, those are all estimates because we don't know what the future of those things would be. So I just want to make sure that the whatever direction we take on this, you know, there's another side to that particular story, because we've had this discussion about, you know, we don't want to have them design right to the dollar amount, because that was an assumption that some people have made. But we can certainly do that, and I think what we provided is what I think is a reasonable approach. I don't know what else, Ms. Steffi, is there anything else that we could provide in terms of a 10-year projection that you haven't already shared? And I think the only other thing you probably could share is that, you know, you can take on a little bit more debt in 1 year versus another year if you needed to move things. Certainly, that would, you know, be possible. But is there anything else that we would provide the board other than what we've already provided them? No. Okay.
I just want to announce that President Cancro has joined us, and I believe she also have a question or a comment.
I know it goes along with Ms. Graff was saying that, you know, we saw those numbers last week. So maybe I missed something, but I thought you were gonna come to us and kind of give us a phasing out based on that ability of us to borrow. And even if that one, there's some tweaks here and there, I know with certain things coming in the next couple of weeks, are you able to come to us on October 6th with the phasing based on those numbers?
If that is the direction, that this is the budget, that these numbers are endorsed by the board, then we can proceed. If there's still a question that needs to go to finance, that you as board members need to further evaluate the financial picture, we don't want to dictate. Again, we are not dictating what your budget is. We need to respond to what you guys tell us the budget is.
So, Mr. Grace, thank you. And you've been more than helpful, and I really appreciate your comments this evening. What I'm recommending, unless there's any objection, we do cancel the October 6th meeting, and that gives the design team the ability to continue to work. We take the matters of the finance that's been presented by Ms. Steffi to the Finance Committee. We have the discussion about whether or not we have options or what other, things that we need associated with this. And we have that discussion. We come back and from a Finance Committee, make a recommendation back to the board whether or not these numbers or the use of the Act 1 as a totality or any other, assumption that's in there is appropriate. At that time, we can then inform the design committee to develop the scenario phasing to fit whatever it is that we determine as a finance committee to then present to the board at the work session. That's as fast as we can do it. If we don't want to do it that fast, we can come back to the board as a work session, have more discussion about what the finance committee has suggested, and then give further direction to the design team. But we're kind of going around in circles here, and it's good discussion, but we need to kind of say, how are we going to proceed forward? And we don't have this on the agenda as an action item for this evening. So that's my recommendation. We move forward, cancel the 6th, address the financial matters in the Finance Committee, and allow the design team, as they were working towards an implementation of a project, to present to the board at a future date yet to be determined. Ms. Clary?
The only comment I would offer to that, and I'm trying to incorporate some of Mr. Winter's comments, though, is while I agree it needs to be seen by finance, I'd like to hear finance's recommendation on what we can afford. But when are we going to vote on that? Because to Mr. Winter's point, some of the assumptions in there, not everyone might be okay with. I really have to think about just some of them that are in there. So are we going to be voting on this budget in October? How do you plan to see that working?
I think a 10-year forecast is not something that the board would vote on, because it's a long-term projection. It's something that we really can't. And if you know, Ms. Steffi, I don't know if it's at year 6 or beyond, we're actually using a running number of like 3.2% in terms of the growth or the change. I don't have it in front of me, so.
But
Well,
I'm not necessarily saying.
We have numbers for like 5 or 6 years that have like true estimates from the Act 1 index and have better budget numbers. But I think from year 6 on out, those are estimated numbers that we received from our financial advisors as a plug-in, meaning we don't have, something from the independent fiscal office or anything like that of the state.
But how is the board, how are you choosing to move on from the finances recommendation? So if I object to whatever that might be, or somebody else does, I'm just trying to understand the process. I'm not.
Yeah. And I think, in all fairness, I wasn't expecting, this type of conversation this evening, but in all fairness, I think it's important that we as a finance committee not only have a recommendation, but we can then, determine how best to get the feedback from the rest of the board, whether that's through a vote or of some sort. I don't know if a vote on 10 years is a good idea, but I might be able to say if the design team is working on a project and the design team says to us that we have a draw schedule of X, Y, and Z, and that draw schedule is available for us to use, we can make it some assumptions on that and say, hey, if we were to do a project like this or like that, that's how we might be able to afford those things. And those would be based on projects. A true vote on all of this, and just to recap this, the vote that we were going to propose at the end of October wasn't necessarily that we were going to do a specific project. It was going to be, do we believe that this concept has merit, both from a financial perspective and from a design perspective, that we want the design professionals to proceed forward with into what's called schematic design. And then there would be another vote, several months after that, after we would see that information, and it would go into what's called design development. So there isn't necessarily a vote on all of this until, sometime, I don't know how long design development goes, but several months, I presume. But we want to make sure that at least preliminarily, we understand what we're getting into. We understand what the potential financial ramifications will be before we ask them to do a whole lot of extra work beyond the design concepts.
I totally.
Trying to get as much information as possible.
I would agree with you from day one. The financial part has always been the most important part to me. So, getting a handle on that is important. I just wanted to understand the process and, how I would be giving my input on the assumption, whatever the finance committee does end up recommending, after we review the assumptions that are made in those, how I give my feedback. That was really my question. Okay.
And that's fair. Yep.
So there's a couple options. One option would just take some type of poll or whatever, or to have a vote on what type of Act 1 assumption that Ms. Steffi would put in the 10-year. If you, just top of my head, 50% of Act 1 and 100% of Act 1, 75% of Act 1, she could use that from a modeling, and that would give you some type of comfort level of what something less than Act 1 would look like. The other thing, probably easier, is she has assumed the Act 1 index going out and use that, and then there's usually a surplus or deficit in each one of those 10 years. She could level set that a tax increase right back down to when there's that surplus of, in this 180 million borrowing, there's 726,000. She could take the 726 out of the local revenue, and the Act 1 would no longer be 3.5, it would be 3.17 or whatever the number is. I don't know what the number is, whatever the number is. And then you would be able to see the Act 1, and you would also be seeing the anticipated tax rate that we would need to have for that particular year based on the borrowing scenarios and other assumptions that are in there. So there's things we can do to give you more comfort level. I don't know where people are on a vote, but it would be very arbitrary for us to pick a number of a percentage of Act 1 at this point. I would rather just have her do the math and see how it flushes out, to be honest.
Any other questions or comments? So I've assumed that from that feedback and from my recommendation, that's how we'll proceed forward. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. And Madam President, that ends guests and scheduled speakers for this evening.
All right, thank you very much. We will now move on. We would like to welcome our new high school patiently waiting school board representatives, Isaac and Gabriella. Thank you for keeping an update about the high school happening. So
Yeah,
we're
Madam
gonna-
President, we're going to do the reports, and then we're going to take public comment on the board action items, and then we're going to appoint the two members.
well, then you're going to have to wait a little longer. Patience is a virtue. So thank you very much. Okay, we are going to move on to board meeting minutes. May I have, where are we? All right, sorry. Where are we left? Oh, sorry about that. I'm on the wrong page. All right, the committee reports are attached from the MCIU this month. Ms. Purdue.
Thank you. The MCIU met in August, and they're actually having their September meeting tonight. At the August meeting, information was provided on upcoming MCIU Education Foundation events. One of them is a Bosco shopping night on October 22 with a special discount of 25% off your entire purchase with a $5 donation to the MCIU. So anyone that's out and about shopping then, please support the MCIU that way. There's also a trivia night on the 7th of November with dinner, raffles, and entertainment to support summer camps, post-secondary education and reading Olympics, and many more of the activities that the MCIU hosts. And that's on the 7th of November. We heard from the Director of Human Resources, who provided a presentation on upcoming changes for the year, but mainly focused on how the MCIU now have 200 new hires for this starting the school year, with about some 65 status changes. Additionally, the MCIU presented the past board president, Janet Flizak, with a special plaque for showing her appreciation and dedication as board president. And then we welcome Dr. Maggie Wright as the new board president for the MCIU. A presentation was also provided on the goals of the school year. And this was a heavy discussion last year, and the MCIU put the goals in what they call the SMART goals template. And a lot of board members seem to be very pleased with that. Additionally, as the PA state budget continues to be delayed, which is affecting some of the funding, a resolution for what they call a revenue anticipation loan, a RAN loan, was approved by the board in the amount of $15 million. And the funds are for the sole purposes of to continue MCIU operations until the funds currently being withheld by the state are released to the MCIU. So this will allow the MCIU to continue its operations until the budget is, until the funds become available. And as I mentioned, the meeting for September is currently going on tonight, and I will have an update at the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to North Monco, Ms. Alston and Mr. Mursky.
Hi, thank you very much. At our most recent meeting, we continued our progress on developing a more comprehensive plan for our facilities and to maximize capacity to address the ongoing wait list of students. We are also trying to take a more creative approach to instruction, and we heard a presentation from Lower Providence Fire Chief, Mr. Lentz. Dr. Zerby initially helped connect Dr. Haas, who is the director of North Monco Tech, with Mr. Lentz, and he presented a new training program. It's a new certification program called Future First Responders of Monco. And all 4 technical career centers in Montgomery County will be able to send initially a few students as part of this pilot program to the public safety training campus to earn certifications in EMT, Firefighter 1, and dispatch. So we're really excited about that collaboration. And then also there is the Indian Valley Chamber of Commerce is hosting a Tastings of the Indian Valley on October 21st, 2025, from 5 to 7:30 at the Franconia Heritage Banquet and Conference Center. And it's to enjoy a taste of local restaurants and eateries, wineries, and breweries. And a portion of the proceeds benefits the North Monco Technical Career Center. And we could probably post that information somewhere. Yep. So that is my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We have a placeholder for the student board representatives. Once you're appointed, this is where you would be speaking, so hang tight. The foundation report, Ms. Donna Pergolini, please.
I hurt my ankle not running. So, first up, our race back to school was on Sunday, September 21st at Huebner Park, and a huge thank you to everyone who ran, walked, and cheered at the race. And shout out to our amazing volunteers and generous sponsors. We couldn't have done it without you. Over 200 people walked and ran, and we raised over $15,000. Congratulations to all the winners. It was actually 2 Arcola 8th graders who won the whole race, and we're already looking forward to next year. Our Fall Alumni and Friends event is October 3rd at Trebles End Brewing. This is a free event, and it'll take place after homecoming, and they can register at methactonalumni.org. And then mark your calendars. The Apex Award is on Wednesday, November 19th at Jeffersonville Golf Club. Our 2025 honorees for the Legacy Award, it's William Bourne. A Community Advocate Award is Ambler Savings Bank. Our alumni honoree is Susan B. Smith, class of 1971, and our educators are Tara Eisen and Jeffrey Jacobs. We're excited, and more information can be found on Methacton Foundation /Apex. And for our staff, our fall grant cycle is now open. So if you have a creative idea that needs funding, we want to hear from you. And last but not least, Dodgeball is Sunday, March 15th. So save the date.
Thank you. I do want to say thank you very much for that event this weekend. Unfortunately, I could not make it, but I know there were a lot of board members helping. But to pull the community together on this is just fantastic. And we really do truly appreciate the efforts you've done for us. So thank you. We'll now move on to communication. Mrs. Throwback. Ms. Throwback.
Good evening. Next week, we will be launching a new version of our monthly superintendent newsletter. What was previously called Community Conversations will now become Methacton Matters. Each month, this newsletter will highlight the many important matters happening across the district, the stories, events, and accomplishments that show who we are and what we value. At the same time, this newsletter will serve as a reminder of why Methacton's people, programs, and events matter. Each month will also include a special video highlighting a school. This month, Dr. Zerby interviewed 2 students from Arrowhead Elementary about the impact of volunteers in our buildings. So I hope you take some time to watch, read, and enjoy. Also coming soon is a new page on our website dedicated to the Methacton Athletics Hall of Fame. For the first time, you'll be able to see all of the Athletics Hall of Fame inductees dating back to 1987 online and in one place. This website launch will correspond with the induction of our newest Hall of Fame class, which will happen prior to the homecoming football game on October 3rd. There's also a new category for the Hall of Fame that we are adding this year. You'll be able to check out the webpage on our district website under the Athletics tab on that day. And finally, an update on our community education programming. We currently are accepting proposals for our winter and spring classes. If you or someone you know is interested in holding a class, either after school for students or in the evening for adults, you can submit your proposal on our website. It's methacton.org/comed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the superintendent's report, Dr. Zerby.
Thank you, Madam President. All we have is the right to know report as posted.
Thank you. We'll now move on to public comment on board action items. The board will now take comments on board action items. This is an opportunity for residents to comment on matters that are to be decided upon as outlined on the agenda. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments on board action items. Anyone for board action item comments? All right. Seeing none, all right, we will now move to the appointment of student board representatives and administrative oath on office on September 24th, 2025. All right. It says you're going to direct the steps.
So Madam President, what we're going to do is we're going to have the board vote on the appointment under number 1, and then we're going to issue the administrative oath.
Okay. May I have a motion to appoint the student board representatives Isaac Novia, thank you, I apologize, and Gabriella Madrak? Thank you very much. All right, I see one. Do I have a second? Ms. Alston was second, and Ms. Cleary was the first motion. Any comments or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries 9-0. Welcome aboard. All right, we're going to now have you do the oath of office. All right, so we'll have you come stand. You guys stay here. I don't want you need. All right, raise your right hand. You're going to repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support and obey and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth. And that I will discharge the duties of the office of student representative to the board with fidelity. Congratulations.
Congratulations and welcome.
And do you have any news for us to share? All right, great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabriella Madrak, and I'm joined by Isaac Novia, and we are both junior class student representatives here at Methacton. Before the school year began, freshman orientation was hosted on August 21st to welcome incoming ninth graders to the high school. Freshmen had the opportunity to tour the campus with the help of student ambassadors, join new clubs at the freshman fair, and play fun icebreaker activities. This event was aimed at easing the freshmen's transition into the high school community, which also sparked excitement for their journey ahead. During the first few days of the new school year, students were welcomed back to Methacton with free samples of treats and beverages from the Windy Hill Cafe, including cheesecake brownies and caramel coffee. All teachers also wore matching dark green shirts, coordinated with Methacton's color scheme, featuring quotes about leadership and empowerment. Additionally, upperclassmen took charge of guiding freshmen around the school and helping them locate their classrooms. These factors created a unifying and comforting space for both new and returning students. Another highlight of the new school year includes the recently introduced Character Strong program. This initiative incorporates different styles of activities, both physical with groups and also teacher-taught, to ensure kindness and a sense of belonging among students. While September has just begun, Character Strong has made its way into classrooms multiple times, cycling through periods for around 15 minutes each lesson. Students have shown their support for the program through their positive feedback and active engagement. Along with Character Strong, Community Cares is an additional pilot leadership program launched at Methacton for the 2025 to 2026 school year. Students will receive mentorship training from qualified professionals and will then use their newfound knowledge to hold 1-hour sessions at Skyview and Arcola. These lessons will center around empathy, kindness, boundaries, and communication to foster a respectful and positive learning environment aimed at empowering younger students. This opportunity will fulfill school service hours for those participating and also open doors for future opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Moving towards the extracurricular of the school, student spirit has been very apparent in the halls of Methacton for these past few weeks, with especially sports being in the spotlight, with dress-up day for cross-country, random item day for volleyball, and jersey day for football. In upcoming events, we have Color Wars and the Powder Puff game, which are huge events for the school that get students excited to root for their team. Different changes have been made this year with scheduling to make sure every student can do the activity they enjoy the most. In regards to Methacton's sports, we've had a proper send-off with most teams taking home victories for their first couple of games, with a special spotlight for cross-country going undefeated at the time of writing this. I don't know if that changed. And football performing very well. Methacton's wide range of clubs is up and running too. Best Buddies has hosted its first meeting. News Journal continues its regularly scheduled broadcast at the beginning of every class and has done anchor tryouts for new faces to join the stream. Esports begins their second season strong after a strong finish to their last with a second place finish in the championship. They've placed ads around the school to raise excitement for the new adventure. And the tribe is filled with Methacton students excited to root on their teammates and have already attended a couple of games. To close out our statements, I have a few miscellaneous topics. Jazz, marching, and concert band have already started their practicing for concert and performances. Choir has had auditions for jazz and is hosting a Tri-Am event for any remaining interest. The summer trip to Italy was a big success, spanning over a week and visiting locations like Rome, Venice, and Siena. And informational meetings are being held for this year's trips, visiting places such as France, Montreal, and Quebec. The play this winter will be Alice in Wonderland, and they have already had their auditions this year and have brought in a lot of new freshman faces who are excited to see what our high school has to offer. With this, Methacton is looking forward to a good year ahead of us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for all those news reports. It's a lot going on there, so thank you. We appreciate it. If you want, you could be dismissed because I know it's a late night for you. And thank you and welcome aboard. Very well done. Very well spoken, both of you. All right. Okay, we are going to now move to. All right, we will now move to board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the August board meeting minutes as attached? Ms. Cleary, may I have a second? Ms. Alston, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 9-0. All right, we'll now move on to the fiscal items. All right, nothing, no comments. May I, nope, you're good. May I have a motion to approve the August board meeting minutes as attached? I mean, the fiscal, oh my gosh. May I have the motion to approve the fiscal items as attached? Mr. Winters, may I have a second? Ms. Purdue, any comments or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, all those opposed? Motion carries 9-0. We'll now move to personnel items.
Good evening and thank you, Madam President. The personnel items include those presented last week at the work session as well as the following additions. One employment classified, Jill Tarswell, Accounting Business Benefit Specialist at the Farina Education Center. We welcome Jill to the Methacton family. And additional supplemental contracts for a room movement and chaperones for homecoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve all personnel items as presented? Ms. Cleary, may I have a second? Ms. Graff, any comments or questions? Mr. Winters?
I screwed up. So my wife was on the list of bills, but it was a reimbursement. So I don't know, Kyle.
A reimbursement, what could you just explain? Do you know what it was a
It
reimbursement?
was a reimbursement for a class.
So it's pursuant to a contract term, an existing, yeah, so there's not a private pecuniary benefit. It also is an item that applies to equally to everyone, that everyone under that contract has access to that. It's not any sort of special treatment. So certainly there's no requirement.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I was in front of it like 10 days ago and then I didn't follow through. So it's usually that last second is when I usually find it, and that's what screwed me up.
So you're good, okay? All right, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
No worries. All those opposed, motion carries 9-0. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to curriculum and programs.
Thank you, Madam President. We just have one item under curriculum programs, and that is to approve the survey for the completion by students in grades 6 and 7 for the Community Cares program as attached. Thank you.
Great. May I have a motion to approve the item under curriculum programs as presented? Ms. Alston, may I have a second? Ms. Graff, any comments or questions? Great. Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carries 9-0. We'll now move on to policy.
Thank you, Madam President. None of these items are actually up for vote, but just a reminder, the notice of intent to repeal for 808.2, the cafeteria point of sale. Essentially, that policy just illustrated definitions that exist within the 800 policy within the attachment. So there's no longer a need to continue to have the 808.2 policy, and it is not a PSBA policy as well. So thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. We'll now move on to other.
I don't think there are any changes from the work session.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve all items as listed under other as presented? Ms. Purdue, can I have a second? Mr. Winters, any comments or questions? Great, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Next is dates for board members' calendars. You will see those listed on the agenda and on the Methacton website. Oh. That's under, Yep, that's it. And then for old business, anyone have anything for new or old business? Oh, yes.
I just wanted to welcome our student reps. I'm very excited for the year ahead. And I also want to say that the marching band is having a friends and family special preview night tomorrow, Thursday, at 8:45.
Thank you. Any other new or old business? All right. Seeing none, we'll now move to courtesy of the floor. The Board of School Directors will now provide an opportunity for residents to make comments on matters that are or may be before the board. The board asks that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and this Board of School Directors may choose to respond to matters following the conclusion of the comments. You can also submit questions via email at information@methacton.org.
Jim Malik, Worcester. For clarity, so you guys know, North Penn wanted to build a new high school, which got voted down by referendum. And they're in the process, from what I hear, of trying the phased-in approach that these two gentlemen suggested. And actually, I think at least the architect is the one doing it at North Penn. So that's just for some clarity. Option 1A versus option 2B, the difference is option 1A has 6 of your priorities in 1A. There's 6 of them. Option 2B has 9. So option 1A, despite what people are saying, has at least 6 of your priorities in it. It's not really $125 million. It's more like $280 million with interest. So you guys keep saying, well, $1.20, $1.25. It's like 250. It could be 275, depending on the interest rate. You're going to have trouble affording that as it is. If you want to save money, just remove some of your wish list priorities. Take them out. Some of these things that are like fringe, lunch and learn, apartment program. You already got an apartment program off campus. And then renovate based upon what you absolutely need. You don't even need a budget. What do you absolutely need? You absolutely need HVAC. They quoted you $18 million. Right off the bat, $18 million plus interest. You know you need that. Then come up with something else you absolutely need. And then finish off with, okay, this is the bare minimum. If that's under your budget, great. Then you can add in your wish list priorities to take you near the top. The way you guys are doing it, you'd be a car salesman's dream. Well, how much you go into buy a car? How much money you got? He'll find you a car. I guarantee it. And that's what these guys are going to do. You're doing it all wrong, and it's not a cost-effective way to do it. What I handed you guys is the FCI analysis from KCBA. I suggest you look at medium and long term, where you're going to need a new Woodland, a new Worcester, possibly a new Skyview Arcola, Farina, facilities, and transportation building. This is your architect. Okay? So I suggest you look at this because your master facilities plan is wrong. The other thing I handed you is a invoice. I apologize. It's from 2021, but your lawyers kept me from getting a lot of this information. It's 17 grand for your high school graduation at the Subaru Park Center. From what I understand, you had luxury boxes in this thing. Can any of you guys tell me what you did with the luxury boxes in the Subaru Park? Well, but I'll tell you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Your borrowing capacity is inadequate for your desires or someone's desires, which was obvious when you could not proceed with a new high school. Part of the issue is overcapacity in a number of the buildings. A few years ago, the board voted for a new Arrowhead School, and the superintendent added 100 to the capacity. That had costs to it, with interest that you're still paying. Arcola is way underfilled at less than 60% capacity. So, a small item at Arcola is that you've got longer corridors, and the corridors need cleaning every day. So there are extra costs. My recollection is that when the Skyview project was being considered, there was an alternative plan not to build Skyview, but to keep a K-5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12 schedule for the classes. So the Skyview ended up being built. The teachers' committee decided on a schedule for the classes, and math suffered. Math is still causing problems because the kids that had short classes in 5th grade never learned there wasn't time enough to teach. And that's showing up in the high school. The U.S. News and World Report came out in August, and Methacton went down again in ranking, down to 76. One time it was 13. Your desire to be at the index every year is not supported by poor rankings. So, things like a bigger pool, I think that's a luxury that we don't need.
Thank you very much. Anyone have comments or questions about courtesy of the floor? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All right, Ms. Alston, may I have a second? Ms. Purdue, meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.